All right, so if you're not already subscribed, go ahead and do so. I appreciate you. Now, let's go ahead and get into this. Now, at the end, I'm going to say who I think is going to win the election. Okay? But let's get into a little history first. I remember back in 2020, excuse me, not 2020, back in the year 2000, it was Al Gore versus George W. Bush, excuse me. And that was one of the most chaotic times for an election. I think I was still in high school at that time, so I couldn't have voted. But talk about coming down to the wire in the state of Florida when George W. Bush's brother, Jeb Bush, was the governor, and somehow he pulls a win out of his butt. Now, back then, people was under the impression that if you win the popular vote, you're going to win the election in general. But that wasn't the case in this situation. And on the screen is two different examples of that back in 2000 and 2016. So, back in the year 2000, Al Gore was projected to win. He was supposed to win by the popular vote. However, we still have that system, the whole entire Electoral College and the votes that goes on there, which really truly does a disservice to the American people and who we want to represent us. Okay, cool. So the final state, coincidentally enough, who helped win the election for George Bush was Jeb. Now, in all fairness, well, there is no fairness there. I just find it odd how when your brother's the governor of one of the big four in that fourth state is the one that helps you win, it was all kinds of chaos. It was on the news. They were saying it was fraud. Jeb helped his brother win, all this other kind of stuff. It was so close. And because we never seen anybody who didn't win at that particular time, I won't say never anybody, but nobody in recent history who won the popular vote did not win the election. It was odd that it was projected that Al Gore won. Everybody thought that. In fact, give me 1 second here.
A big call to make. CNN announces that we call Florida in the Al Gore column. This is a state both campaigns desperately wanted to win.
Stand by. CNN right now is moving our earlier declaration of Florida back to the too close to call column. 25 very big electoral votes in the home state of the governor's brother, Jeb Bush, are hanging in the balance. This no longer is a victory for Vice President Gore. George Bush, governor of Texas, will become the 43rd president of the United States at 18 minutes past 2 o'clock Eastern Time. CNN declares that George Walker Bush has won Florida's 25 electoral votes.
And if you're being real here, when it came to being president, nobody thought that George Bush was going to win between. You got to think about the time. Jeb back then was seen as the more smart, intelligent, articulate brother who was more likely going to follow his father's footsteps and go on to be president. A lot of people were surprised that George Bush won. And a lot of it was because he said the same name of his father, and, they wanted to have another Bush in office. That whole entire nepotism thing, right?
Vice President has recalled the governor and retracted his concession.
But this race is simply too close to call. And until the recount is concluded and the results of Florida become official, our campaign continues.
Bill Daley, the chairman of the Gore campaign, you just heard it. We're all, I think we can hardly believe our ears. He said, until the results are official and certified in the state of Florida, we are going to continue our campaign.
And they always talk about voter fraud, but the biggest controversy came from a Republican state during an election when the Republican candidate was not expected to win. Nobody really expected George Bush to win. So I still remember the recounts. I remember watching almost daily. You'll see people with magnifying glasses looking at little Scantron sheets or the little punch hole sheets or what have you, trying to figure out who voted for who and all this other kind of stuff. And it was just one of the craziest things.
Hope and believe we have elected the next president of the United States. they're still counting, and I'm confident when it's all said and done, we will prevail.
For every successive hour from this point on, CNN will be your network to find out what is the latest on that presidential race.
That's right.
In the United States.
So stay with CNN because whatever is happening, we are going to be bringing it to you.
And folks, in the year 2004, please, could you make up your minds a little more conclusively?
In the year 2004, they made sure to stay on top of Florida Dallas for sure. Now, why is this relevant to today? Kamala Harris is losing a lot of popularity and Donald Trump is on the rise. So you would think naturally that Donald Trump is guaranteed to win this election. But again, you see right here, Al Gore, even though it is a small margin, had the higher popular vote. And based off that, you would think he would have won. But at the end of the day, they really don't care what you vote for. The people who are power at B are going to choose who they want to. And here's the thing about this. Let's fast forward a little bit later, right? Let me go back to this. In 2016, when it comes to Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton again won the popular vote by a much larger margin. So you would have thought that she would have won the election, right? But she lost. But in all fairness, most people didn't even think Hillary should have won the general election for the Democratic Party. Why? Because they didn't count for the people. The people votes doesn't matter when it versus people that they elect to think and choose for us. And what I mean by that, super delegates when it comes to the Democratic Party. I remember back then when I first heard about super delegates, because I'm not going to lie, I was going to vote for Bernie. I think Bernie's an amazing candidate, especially back then. Unlike Hillary Clinton, who has a history of saying that, black people are super predators and all this sort of kind of stuff, Bernie, from the time he was in college up until a senator in his 70s, has always rode for civil rights, black people, and equal treatment. He has a record that's shown that even before he became the office. So let's hear about these super delegates right quick.
Still with us now is the national chair of the Democratic Party, Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Obviously, Congresswoman, nobody is expecting this race to end anytime soon. You got two candidates. The races so far have all been very close. The thing that's different, though, between the Democratic process and the Republican process is this issue of superdelegates. And so we have had some hard to explain. Results that are hard to explain to people who don't care that much about politics without it seeming drastically unfair. For example, the fact that Bernie Sanders won by 22 points in New Hampshire, but the delegate count came out of that race basically even.
Does that sound fair? Why should the election process be complicated? I think when you vote for somebody, that's who you should get. It shouldn't be complicated. It shouldn't be tricky. It shouldn't be all these laws in place for the average person not to know what they're talking about. I would think, hey, if, I don't know, let's just throw a number out there, 50,000 people voted for Bernie Sanders and, 30,000 voted for Hillary Clinton. Bernie should get those delegates, right? Points, whatever you want to call it. But instead, because of these super delegates, Hillary could be even out or win some, more than Bernie. Why? Because the elite always have us at the bottom.
Is there an internal dialogue, internal discussion in the Democratic Party about the superdelegate process and whether or not the party's going to stick with it?
The superdelegates, and it's just, I'm glad you're asking me about.
And look at that right there. Super 16, one for Bernie.
This, because the way the media has been reporting this is incorrect. There aren't pledged delegates, i.e. superdelegates, earned at any of these primary or caucus contests, Rachel. Those unpledged delegates are elected officials, party leaders, people who have spent years and years in the Democratic Party. Members of Congress, our DNC members are superdelegates, and they have the ability to decide who they choose to support at the convention at any point. So they are not actually, whatever they're saying now, I mean, most of them presumably would remain committed to who they've committed to now, but they haven't all committed to a candidate. And they're really free to decide all the way up into July. If you didn't have superdelegates, and keep in mind, we created superdelegates back in 1984. So this is not something that was suddenly developed.
Created in 1984, but not too many people knew what a superdelegate was.
At this election cycle. But we do that so that we can make sure we maximize the ability of real people to participate in our convention. If you look at our convention, it looks like the rainbow that is America. If you look at the Republican convention, they put a little bit of the rainbow in the front row, and then the rest of their convention is not so diverse. So it's really important that we make sure we separate the types of delegates. Today in Nevada, in New Hampshire, in Iowa before it, the pledged delegates, which are 85% of the delegates that participate and cast a vote at the convention, those are what are earned in primaries and caucuses. And the rest of the 15% that are so-called superdelegates, they have up until July to decide who to support. So combining them at each phase of this contest is really not an accurate picture of the way this works.
So you would say that no superdelegate, even if they've said who they're going to support, we shouldn't take them at their word? We shouldn't consider them to be... they're not just a symbolic role. They get to actually participate in the process of who gets picked as the nominee.
I'll just give you an example.
Exactly. It is not a symbolic role, so they get to choose who is the nominee and who gets to run for president and potentially be president if it's that particular person's turn. And I'll give my opinion on that a little bit later.
So I can speak, for myself. I am obviously not, not supporting either one of the candidates, but I'm a member of Congress, which makes me a superdelegate, and I'm also the DNC chair, which would make me a superdelegate. I get one vote at the convention, but if I were pledged to a candidate, as a superdelegate, I can pledge now, I can pledge in a month, I can wait all the way until the convention and decide. And there were, if you remember in 2008, there were superdelegates through the primary as the candidates winnowed down to then Senator Clinton and then Senator Obama, who did change their minds. So I really think it's important for the media, at least in our case, and the Republicans do have superdelegates as well, but they don't calculate them in the same way. It's really important to report these in a completely different way and not add them mathematically as each contest unfolds because of the way that our unpledged delegates can make their decision at any point.
DNC Chair W. Wasserman Schultz, thank you very much.
And back then, by and large, the people voted for Bernie, but the delegates chose Hillary. Now, they were saying Bernie was making a lot of outlandish claims of things he could have promised and followed through with, yada, yada, yada. And Clinton pretty much wrote off the fact that she was a Clinton. Or she is a Clinton. I think they're still married. But when we, the people, choose somebody that can help benefit us, that will think more for us, that we have a feeling that won't be controlled by the larger powers by be, the larger powers at be always have a backup plan. For the Democratic Party, it's superdelegates. And then you have the Electoral College. Because realistically speaking, if Bernie Sanders would have ran in 2016, he would have crushed Donald Trump. And now it's the big fear when Hillary won. That was the big question that was people were asking back then. Can Hillary beat Donald Trump? And she was quote unquote more popular, but she still lost. Now, if that popular vote was the actual election, she should have won. But again, they don't give a care about what we want because this whole entire Electoral College. Now, let's think about this for a second. With George Bush being into office, he got us involved in one of the longest ongoing wars. Let's be real here. They say there's no conflict going on right now, but I don't believe it, right? But one of the longest ongoing wars in history that really had no end, that started off false and baseless information. We were so riled up about 9/11, we didn't ask for proof. We just went ahead and said, okay, let's make them pay. And I remember when 9/11 happened, so I get it. Emotions were high for every single American. And that's how he won his circle time. I mean, let's be real here. Before Trump, I think George W. Bush is probably the most made fun of president in recent history. There are so many clips and audios and everything else of, him not spelling potato, or him speaking or talking in word salads, misquoting himself, not having a complete thought. People was making fun of him all the time and was asking how come Jeb didn't get into the office instead. And when Jeb finally decided to run because of how George W. Bush performed in office, there was question they even want another Bush in office. Well, and then we have the whole entire Hillary Clinton and Bernie, and Hillary dropped the ball. So this brings us to today, where we have Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. We didn't get to pick Kamala Harris, and if we're being honest with you, we wouldn't have got to pick her anyway. Just like what happened in 2016 when they wanted Hillary in office, and because these quote-unquote super delegates that was out there, they would have went ahead and found a way to get her in there, no matter who she would have ran against, if there was a general election for the DNC, right? Okay. We see how badly she's performing, how she's not looking as a leader, all this other kind of stuff. But the one thing she's pretty much promising to do is keeping us in war. If it's not our continued support of Israel, she also says she'll dedicate her support to Ukraine. And that's what's going to get her elected. So all this other kind of stuff don't matter. Because with Trump, he did say that he will go ahead and support Israel, but he also said he wanted to get us out of Ukraine. So that's less money for war. And that's what I think it's going to boil down to. Who could be controlled the easiest? Say what you want about Trump. He is a wild card. Even to the point where people didn't even want to tell him the full powers he had. So, that's just my opinion on it. I really do think that Kamala's going to win just for the fact that she wants to make sure we stay in war. And it doesn't matter who we vote for. It doesn't matter who wins the popular vote. Because when they're right down to it, when it comes down to the Electoral College, they'll choose who they want. Granted, they're supposed to be choosing their vote and voting for based off the people in their area, but they're going to vote for who they want to. And it doesn't matter how bad of a campaign that Kamala is running right now, how lackluster, her word salads. It's the fact that she wants to keep us in more wars and conflict, and more wars and conflict means running for people that we don't see or know who they are. That's why I think she's going to win. I'll be very surprised if she doesn't win. And it's not me supporting her saying I want her to win. If I'm being honest with you, I didn't want neither one of them to run. And I voted early. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't vote for her or Trump. I voted for Jill Stein. Because I really do want there to be a third party in this whole entire process. Because realistically speaking, it doesn't matter if you're red or blue, it's going to be the outcome is going to be the same. It's going to be packaged and worded differently. People are unjustly and are loyal to a party that's not loyal to them. They're loyal to their donors. At least if a third party will have a better opportunity to have America first. We're suffering. We're hurting. But yet we're supporting everybody else but the people who actually live here. And I want a candidate that can do that. And here's the other thing. I'll leave on this. And the main reason I also vote, people say it's a throwaway vote when you don't vote for Trump or Hillary. I will never believe that. If somebody tells you that, you don't believe it either. Because, yes, no matter who is president, they're going to do what they want to do. There's no such thing as difference between Republican and Democrat. However, there is a big difference when it comes down to who can you vote for senator. What propositions you want to make sure you vote for or go against, like in my state in Florida. They had on there about abortions. They had on there about legalization of marijuana. They had on their homestead exemptions. They had things like that on there, things that can really help or harm my day-to-day life. That's why I continue to vote in the election for president, because it's not the president. You just don't go up to a poll and you see, oh, Trump, Hillary, Jill Stein, whoever, vote for this person, and that's it. No, there are very important issues that are local to your state on there that you should be voting for. And you'll be foolish not to. So it doesn't matter who you vote for, as long as you're voting for what best interests you in your state. And that's how you can really change the outcome of the real elections. So I know people are frustrated, and rightfully so, you should be. But vote. If not, if you just don't care about the presidential candidate like I do, at least vote for your local issues. Care about your home. Anyways, if you made it to the end or saw this part, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. I appreciate you.